for anybody listening to this, perhaps is looking at going to IPO, whether it's via a SPAC or in a more traditional method, but what would you recommend in terms of preparation? What do you think they should be thinking about? What sort of skills do they need to be building within their team as they prepare to go into that process?
Yeah, I think the overarching theme is preparing the accounting department and getting that team built out and in a place where the transition's easier from private to public, but specifically building out internal controls, the documentation of those controls, and then the financial reporting, and just having the processes in place to really own those financial statements and have a streamlined financial reporting process is really helpful before you start the process of going public.
Absolutely. And obviously, as you go through this process, we talked a little bit about the SEC's opinion of Bitcoin, but were there any other challenges because you come from such a new industry, as it were?
Yeah, the other challenge was definitely with investors. There's already a small subset of investors that are even open to crypto. And so it just limited the pool of people that we could find partnerships with. And that's just a challenge that's inherent in new industries like cryptocurrency still.
I'd say don't be afraid to stay in your lane. I love what you said, Hannah, around create your own lane. So yeah, not staying in your lane might be your super strength. Don't be afraid of showing your vulnerability and showing yourself outside of work. I think it'll be a way you can forge great relationships really quickly. Understand other people in your team and on your wider exec team and where their strengths lie so you can play to them, and understand and back your own strengths and where you can slot in. But overall, don't give yourself it's a big enough job as it is. You don't need any, you just cut yourself a break. Don't try and do too much, empower your team. So don't try and do too much too fast. Take your time, get to know the business, get to know people, empower your team. And don't stay in lane. It's no fun staying in lane.
Well, the structure will depend on who you have in front of you, of course. And that's the first step that you have to determine is what the audience will be. And of course, you can go for individuals and adapt to each person you will have in front of you. But I will go for something simple. When you work in finance, you have two types of audiences. You have, on the one hand, the executives, and on the other, the experts. And those will have two different approaches. For experts, it will be more academical, in which you will first show the supporting evidence of what you've done. So you will show your analysis, and it will be a sort of deductive approach. So that means that you will build up your conclusion piece by piece, so that at the end they will understand the conclusion that you will share, and that will help them to take a decision. But when you go for executives, those are busy people. They do not have the time to have a full story determined by steps. They will want you to go directly into the conclusion, and then, if you have the time, you can simply complete with the supporting evidence of your work. What has happened? What's the impact? And then what are the next steps?
First one is around generative AI. My crystal ball looking to that. I think 2023 for the office of the CFO was all about the theory of generative AI, right? I spoke a lot about this. I did a lot of conferences and presentations, a lot of thought leadership in this space. I think the next 12 months for the office of the CFO, as it relates to generative AI, is application, right? It's like, I got the theory. Show me how to do it. Like, what is the use case, right? Because now I think people are getting a lot more comfortable, because 2023, generative AI for the, I would say, traditional finance, FP&A, CFO person was like an elephant. It was like, there's no way I could do this stuff, right? The year of 2024 is now, how do I break down that elephant one leg at a time, right? So I think the major theme around generative AI for finance, FP&A, and CFO professionals is all around application. Like, make it make sense. Like, give me use cases. How do you turn it? How can I leverage this to have value that I can give back to the business? I think that's number one. Number two, continued uncertainty, right? We're coming into an election year at the US that just automatically has a lot of uncertainty. We still see the private equity VC market. Who knows what they're going to do this year, right? We're coming off the tailwind of like one of the lowest IPOs of all time, right? We've got the global economy, the US economy. We still have a lot of those uncertainties. So I think the second thing is continue to navigate business around uncertainty and challenge, right? That is going to be the priority for the next 12 months.
So I think decisions are made with the view of the mission in hand. So very similar to what it was previously. It's just doing it in a slightly different way. You're still building essentially a brand. So you want to create brand awareness with regards to Alacrity, doing things like this, going to events, meeting people. That there's nothing like seeing someone, talking to someone, get to know someone, and then you build naturally your network anyway. That will only then in turn help the foundation, because people talk to people. So I might say to someone, this is what we do. They might speak to someone else further down the line, like, oh, I know someone that could help you. And it all comes back in that way. I've learned that tenfold over the last 8 months. And that's what I find really important. But with regards to the decision making, it's very similar. It's still, a lot of communication with the team and the board. So everyone's really aware of what we're doing, and that's very clear and transparent. And it's still on target for the mission in hand. And the values are all aligned. That's why, I chose to come here, because my values aligned with my new workplace, which I really enjoy, which I get a lot of job satisfaction from. So all of that is very, very similar to a for-profit business.
So look, M&A is always sort of something that PE investors tend to look at. I think in today's market, the price of debt has obviously increased a lot over the last 12 months with the wider macroeconomic outlook. M&A is typically sort of funded by debt. So actually investors and PE investors are having to look at different ways to deliver the same historic returns that they have. And a lot of that, speaking to investors, is going to come from operational improvements. It's automation, it's increasing sales, it's increasing margins. So they're all sort of key things to look at. I think, like I say, that the buy and build piece, in terms of a high volume of acquisitions, is a different skill set. So you look at sectors like healthcare, which has been ripe for private equity investment. It's fragmented. It's multiple individual sort of sites. There are, like I say, continuous sort of M&A. That's quite a different skill set, having to constantly be looking at evaluating deals, prices, sitting around the negotiation table, leading discussions, due diligence through to integration. A real high volume of M&A is very different to just looking at maybe one or two bolt-ons in a sort of investment cycle. So we find that, again, it's sort of situational. People want high volume M&A to execute on a buy and build.
I always use technology for myself, but also transmit all of this knowledge to my teams. And when 1 year ago, ChatGPT arrived, I looked at it and said, oh, that's interesting. So I really like when on Christmas you get a new gift and you just kind of keep playing with it. That was the same. I thought, oh, maybe somebody's going to take it away from me. Like, let's just do as much as possible. And like for any new tool or even Excel still, I always try to see if somebody else found a good way to use Excel, to use PowerPoint. And for ChatGPT, I did the same. I started to look who is an expert at it, who is talking about how to use it for business. And a lot of people were talking about ChatGPT, but they were saying, oh, here's how I wrote a rap song using ChatGPT. Here is a poem that I did for my wife. And then you had the internet marketers starting to use it to write blogs. But nobody was using it and showing us how to use it for business. And that's where I thought my brain was like just racing on everything we could do for business. And that's where I thought, okay, I will take care of it, because I think there is a lot to do. And I mean, this is a technology podcast, and you yourself, you are really good in ERPs. And I really think finance are the champions of using the technology the right way in companies, because we are really good at Excel. Like a lot of companies, they go to finance if there is an Excel problem. We are really good at using the ERPs, also PowerPoint. And then for AI, I really think, and for Gen AI, that us in finance, we can be the one that lead the change and show to all of the other departments that you can use AI to be more productive and add more value. So that's why, like, this is really for me my journey. I want to help all of the finance people learn it, and then after that, they give that back to their team and to their colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think understanding the reporting requirements, especially specific to your industry, is really important. There's been a lot of accounting guidance changes. I know there's some big RevRec changes that occurred kind of in the 2018 timeframe. Understanding those and really getting yourself set up in a system to run those as smoothly as possible is the biggest benefit. We had to go through some of those transitions as a public company and adhere to those transition reporting deadlines that the SEC laid out. And so really altering our systems, implementing new systems, getting our data prepared to be able to report in that manner, it's a big lift for the teams, and it's all while they're doing their day-to-day jobs, right? So the more that you can understand maybe what changes in reporting are coming, if you are transitioning from a private company to a public company, and getting yourself really set up for those is key to being successful in that transition.
So taking the time to understand what actually causes a barrier to change is really important, and the scarf reactions is one tool to do that, right? And that is it's about one is a certainty, right? That people foresee the future, and very often in uncertain times they cannot, and just the fact that you don't have any certainty, that might be a problem. Then you have to explain to them that they can feel safe. It might also be about status, maybe not necessarily in terms of job title, but also within a group. If you're the one who is good at the Excel sheet and suddenly we don't need the Excel sheet anymore, what's your internal status then within the group? Because then it's reduced to something else, and that changes also when new employees join, or if you get a new manager or whatever. But addressing that is important. And then the autonomy part is the aim in the scarf. That's about, obviously, if people feel that they're losing autonomy, that they can't really decide over what to do anymore on their own, and somebody's forcing them down a path that they don't like. That's also something that causes a change resistance, right? But all of these, and I could keep talking about this, but the main idea is that when we need people to change, and specifically when it comes to performance in a changing finance function, where things change, systems are implemented, people need to adjust, then identifying what might cause people to resist that change, and then having a dialogue around that is a really effective management tool from my perspective.
I've tried to. I'm always on the lookout for better ways to do this, but the way I tend to do it is with a kind of 360-degree feedback. So that individual, because I look at it from the kind of finance professional point of view, because so it's them doing this 360 degrees. What does their boss think? What does their team think? What does their colleagues think of how well they know the business? And I suppose it's like, you could say it's the non-finance opinion piece of it, which you could do in a kind of, I hate the phrase, but customer survey. I don't really like the other parts of the business being called customers. That's why I hate the term, really. But in reality, we do kind of service their needs in the process of serving business performance. So if you ask them, how much do you think I know about the business or your part of the business? If they say naff all, you're pretty, score not naff all. Let's put it 0 out of 10. If they say 0, then you need help. If they say 10, then you know you're doing pretty well. If you can get a cross section of different non-finance people saying, yeah, this person, seems to understand what we're trying to do, then you've kind of got that benchmark. But it's not something you could benchmark across organizations, I don't think, because there's no standard way of measuring it. But I think as a CFO, trying to measure your team, asking what the other parts of the business think about your team, and individuals in the team, both collectively and as individuals, is probably the way to go. And if you can get people to score it, that gives you a way of measuring improvement.
Yeah, so my first tip is build a strong team. So which will mean I will always advise to get someone local and that have the network, the contacts on the ground. And then ideally, if there are people that look for relocation, bring someone that's already within the company, that knows the product, that have all the training already. It could be someone from product team, for marketing, for customer success, and bring them to that new geo, and then really build a strong team of someone new that have the culture and the network of this new geo, and someone that has the culture of the company. So I think the headcount is the most important one. Then the second one is obviously have enough funding to go through that journey and be able to fund a business that it could be for 9 to 12 months. There's no revenue, and you need to be prepared for that. It's a risk. And then the other tips is also, as the organization, you need to make sure you integrate this team. You need to make sure they are able to meet face to face or meet their colleague, fly them over to the headquarters, have a strong connection, always include them. Like a lot of things that I've done, for example, is like switching from local UK system to global enterprise. So we have one solution for travel that is for everyone. Offer the same thing to everyone. Feel they are included in the company. And often I see there are different ways we do local things, but doesn't always suit them. And then it's trying as well to have an in-depth knowledge of the market yourself. You have to have that vision and don't take everything for granted from like what internally they tell you on local. Also have that mindset of learn yourself, get a third party to advise you to make the best decision.
First thing to do, I think, is back to what we said in the very start of the conversation. What is your strategic intent around sustainability? Does it match whatever you are doing from a transactional point of view? So what's your strategy? Do you understand the risks and the opportunities? What is your risk appetite around this? So go into a transaction thinking about, where am I today and where do I need to be? So that's sort of your own side of this equation. Secondly, think about the integrated nature of this, because as we say in the report, you can do transactional due diligence in many different forms, but each of those has a sustainability thread somewhere. So understand the impact of these issues and risks across all the elements. So be that human resource due diligence, be that legal due diligence. I talked about Me Too clauses and warranties. There are so many nuances to this. It's not, do I just do sustainability due diligence? It's sustainability as a risk in all the other forms of due diligence that you need. Think about how it impacts your operating model going forwards, because that is going to be the most fundamental risk in the whole thing. And why do people walk away? It's because that journey of securing the operating model, making it sustainable, is a risk that people aren't willing to take. There isn't the progress. Recognize that it requires constant action investment. So is agility and be flexible, but recognize that this is a journey you need to work on as an organization. So if you are buying another organization, you're integrating two work streams. How are you going to do that? How are you going to keep them integrated? How are you going to deal with emerging threats? Because, yeah, the way we see climate change now is probably different than the stories you and I would have told 12 months ago.
Be proactive internally where you can. I don't think it makes sense for you to spend the effort to go through the gap conversion if you don't have that requirement yet, but just do as good of a job as you can, just documenting what you're doing under your current gap and making sure that that's kind of done and dusted, so that when you do have to go through a gap conversion, that it's kind of setting the tone for that. And also just in terms of the strategy for going through the gap conversion itself and how you want to work with an advisor through that process. There's a lot of education that I'm trying to do here, that there are other ways of working with advisors than just going to a big firm that your auditor refers you to. And I think especially for scale-up companies that are doing fundraising, they don't necessarily have the budgets to be, engaging with the big four either. So I think just the main thing is really understanding the strategy for, okay, how are we going to go through each phase of this gap conversion? And what do we want to try to do in-house versus have somebody help us with? And at the end of the day, after this gap conversion is done, how do we make sure that our local team understands everything that happened so that they can go through the audit afterwards? And how will they kind of maintain the conversion ledger as well? And I think that that's potentially a gap that I see, that that companies just really rely on a big firm, and they think like, oh yeah, we checked the box, we've engaged somebody to do our gap conversion, we don't need to think about it again. And I think if you spend a little bit more time on the front end of that, just really analyzing that strategy, that you'll realize that you have different options for how to layer advisors into that process.
I think it's the mindset that I would focus on. You're given this task. The most challenging, if somebody like myself, I will be shooting myself if I don't know it all by myself. And then the tip that I would give is, no, you don't have to know everything by yourself. You need to know what is the objective, what's the vision, what's the end goal, what good look like. If you can define that, what good looks like, and if you have an opportunity to work that through with the team, I would definitely encourage to do that. That's probably the top tip. What good looks like when you come out of it, what's the achievement that you need to see, and then start breaking it down. How do you approach it? Will help you have that execution roadmap, and then balance this out with the management or a senior executive sponsor's expectation. And again, that's another thing that I would always say: a big project or a change management will need to have an executive sponsor who is then either validating what you're doing, providing the top-down guidance, but also managing expectations with the other senior executives of the team as well. So and then of course securing the budgets and resources that you will need. Right. So that's important to identify and pre-agree who is actually the executive sponsor for this program is important.
The three themes that I think are really coming across clearly in the book is learning the language. So understand just some of the basic concepts. It doesn't mean you need to become a data scientist, but as you brought up in our dialogue, understand what is a feature, what is supervised machine learning, what does cross-validation mean? So know some of the knowledge, the verbs, understand how to challenge assumptions, and ask good questions. And what is a good question? We give examples in the book, but it's always around why. Why did you choose this? Why are you assuming this? Those are really the focus. So language, challenging assumptions, asking good questions.
It's all about how can we get the business folks, right, the non-technical people, to leverage their domain expertise, their specialized knowledge that the data team doesn't have, right? How can we get these two parties to come together more effectively? And to do those things, you got to do exactly what Howard said, right? Learn the language, ask the right questions, challenge assumptions.
I think another area was a scope. So but this is more, I guess, well, it was more around the requirements, I guess. So it was it's always a way you put a set of requirements, you try and define what you're trying to build, and then you when you sort of get further down the line in the design, or even when you've gone live, you end up it's not quite right. But what we did is we sort of built a set of requirements over time. Different areas of the program were building the requirements, and we got to a point where we just felt that this wasn't fully joined up, and is this really reflecting? So we did a bit of a reset, and I pulled together a sort of an end-to-end, I call it high level, it was about 150 page requirements document, which was, level 3 or something. It was not down in the depths, but it was still quite comprehensive. And we just sent that back out to our customers, to all the key people in the finance. And we said, look, this is what we're planning to do. Give us your feedback. And I just created this database of feedback, and we had to pick one by one to try and just align it all to make sure that we all had it nailed down. We knew we were going to deliver what they wanted, what they expected. And we just reformed that and got a really good set of requirements. It took a long time, a lot of work, but we ended up just resetting it all, which I think would have saved a lot of time and money later on the line if we hadn't got that alignment at that point.
Have a plan. But then I also love the expression from Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So have a plan, but use it. Have a plan, but use it as a tool, not a constraint. So have a plan where you've thought through the issues, where you've thought through things, where you've come up with scenarios. Know where you want to go directionally, but equally know that there are going to be bumps along the road, and there are going to be things that you hadn't thought of. And if you've had a plan, you can successfully get yourself back on track. And, it won't be a straight road. It's going to meander all around just the way life does. But yeah, number one advice on that is have a plan. Make sure you've got a really, really strong team. And I always talk about within any business, I always like to say every business is unique, but at its fundamental level, every business is the same. They need to find and win customers. That's called sales and marketing. They need to deliver to their customers. That's called operations. And they need to manage the money going in and out. And that's called finance. And anyone who's looking to scale needs strong sales and marketing, strong operations, and strong finance. And if one of those is weak, it's kind of like a 3-legged stool, and it's going to fall over.